Section 8, this will be a little longer, so we'll spend a little bit of time here. This is where most of the new captain training changes are made to. But initially, modification to the equipment bands. This is just reflecting what the fleet mix looks like today and what we would envision potentially flying. So anything that's in the pay rate tables will be in this table as well to make that consistent. No changes, excuse me, to anything that's already in service. We are missing some aircraft that were in the pay rate table, so they were just added to here, the 380, 330, that list is in the last bullet. And we'll continue on. And so here's the, so these are all, everything we're presenting to you is in order of how it appears in the contract. So it's going to feel a little bit disjoint in terms of, we're going to show you some provisions that talk about new captains without actually talking about the whole topic. So the idea here, though, is that once we figure out that a probationary pilot or a new captain who has received an award, how's their freeze going to work? And what they're going to end up with, and I got to get rid of, I have something blocking my screen that you don't see. There we go. Nope. There. So we'll have two kinds of freezes for them. They mimic the freezes that a pilot would get off for probation. So essentially, if you're a new captain, you're going to be able to, a new hire captain, you're going to be able to hold that award long before you're ever actually able to go to training. So we're going to impute an effective date for that award, which would be when you are qualified to go to training. And that's when that 24 months start. The 25 months start. The 24 months would be for a pilot, say a probationary pilot who already meets the qualifications to go to training. We don't want them to be any different from a line pilot. So their 24 months would start from the award date. The difference there for pay, I think somebody had asked about pay before. So the second or the last bullet there, these pilots will be pay protected based upon the actual effective date of the new vacancy. So just because a pilot has to wait, you're going to lock that pilot into going to captain training. You're going to pay them as a captain as soon as they're eligible to go to training, even if you, the company, decided to delay their training for some reason. Just like it would happen to anybody else, we're just imputing a different point to protect their pay. Right. So if a new hire pilot, so if we're in the world, and it's going to take a while to get there, we'll go over that in a moment. If a new hire captain does receive a new hire pilot does receive a captain award in their new hire drop, the company is going to continue to offer those captain vacancies up until the time that that pilot is scheduled for training, unless the pilot raises their hand and says, you know what, I want to keep that award. I'm gonna do it anyway. The idea here is to protect a pilot who might be in the bottom of their new hire class, and that's the only thing left that they have to choose from. So what we're concerned about there, of course, is allowing for two things. One is the opportunity for QWL, all the improvements that we're making to the contract, to have their effect and entice pilots that are already out on the line to bid these positions. There might be a little bit of a time lag there while pilots take a look at the new contract, wait for it to happen. The other thing is that the company won't be able to train. You haven't seen that yet. The company isn't even going to be able to train a new hire pilot or what we will call an accelerated pilot. That just means sooner than what they could do today, until all of our QWL improvements are in place, are fully implemented and in place. So they've got already a roadblock to get through there. We believe, and I'm comfortable saying it here, we've been telling Kirby and company that, look, you fix the contract, you will get subscription to these unfilled captain vacancies from existing pilots. You know, one of the main reasons that people aren't bidding into being junior actually, there's also a problem with some of our wide body categories, as I'm sure you're all aware, but certainly into the new hire captain positions, new captain positions that are going unfilled, is that the work rules need improvement. And so that tool has to be in place before we're going to allow the company to use this second tool. And then we have a bunch of accoutrements and improvements to training and oversight and whatnot that we probably should have for all of our pilots. And maybe this is a toe in the water, a step in that direction. That was one of the requirements that we imposed on the company so that they could even consider this new process of allowing either a probationary captain or a pilot, probationary pilot or a pilot in a new hire class to lock themselves into a future captain slot. So the way that this particular protection works, they'll continue to offer the vacancy, and then if on a subsequent vacancy, it says, more bidders than the published positions that are available. What that means is that you have filled that position that new hire pilot was awarded, because that position was continually being offered. So by filling that position, that new hire captain is no longer required to fill it. They will also then at that point have an opportunity to say, hey, take it away from me there too. They can either lock it in up front, or they can wait, and before they go to training, they can say, hey, I'd like to be substituted out. And of course, it's just a catch-all there. Pilots filling that substitution would have to be qualified to be normally awarded a captain position coming off the line, which is 500 hours at United, off probation. And a catch-all that's always true is that you have to meet the FAR minimums to be able to fly as a captain. First-time captain bidding freeze release. So this is another tool to get pilots out on the line to be able to fill these positions sooner than they otherwise could. So if you're under a bidding freeze before they ever train a new captain or new pilot as a captain, or even before they ever offer them the chance to fill that vacancy, bidding freezes will have to be relaxed. That's essentially what this is all saying. So you'll carry it with you, the freeze with you, which is something that we have today. And the example there kind of explains it. If you have a 36-month bidding freeze, you're 20 months into it, the company needs to unfreeze you and give you a chance to bid one of these unfilled captain vacancies before they allow accelerated pilots. Free start dates for everybody. They will now start on the award date of the vacancy. So freezes start sooner and sooner.
Still have 30. Yeah, is that retro?
No. Sorry. Okay, removing of freezes for unfilled captain categories. So for the company to start assigning the unfilled positions, I think I got ahead a little bit and talked about this already. So all freezes will have to be lifted. So what we envision is they'll have a normal vacancy out, they'll have unfilled vacancies. Now the next step will be to lift all the existing freezes that are out there, see what kind of appetite there is for these positions. Once those freezes are lifted, if the positions still remain unfilled, then first officers on probation will be eligible to be awarded that vacancy in that category. And then if the company does not lift the freezes, chooses not to for whatever reason, they're unfilled, but they don't lift the freezes, then those captain vacancies cannot be filled by a new hire. They don't get saved for a new hire class. Change to the displacement timeline. So we're getting rid of secondary and tertiary displacements. All displacements will follow a 14-day timeline, and all the difficulty that goes with that. So what that means is that the ease of administration the company had before in current book with being able to go from 21 to 14 to 7, now they would have to run, say, a similar 3 displacements as separate 14-day displacements. I know that adds up to 42, which is 2 days less, but they have to do the whole awarding process. It can't just follow one after the other. So this is a administrative burden to make displacing harder. All right, entitlements for pilots taking a vacancy. So you bid out of a category that has an ongoing displacement. You'll have rights for 120 days to be able to get the paid move and not be subject to a freeze. Today, it's only if you take the vacancy during the displacement process. So this mirrors the 120 days that exists in other areas. It allows us to capture pilots that did something that helped that displacement process out and give them the benefits of a displacement. All right, new definition of activation. So now, rather than waiting for the start of OE, which, as you all recall recently, though it's getting better, was pretty bad, pretty extreme examples of pilots waiting a long time just for their first flight of OE, which is what the old trigger was. It'll now start at the completion of your LOE, so basically your simulator ride in the training center. As soon as you finish that ride, your pay will start. If you haven't started within 60 days of the effective date of the vacancy bid. So this is going now with the, this is a change because of the freeze starting sooner. You'll have displacement rights within 60 days or the ability to bid any vacancy or continue to be pay protected if you're under a pay protection provision at that point. And you'll have 45 days from the effective date to make that decision. If you don't make an election, you'll be considered, today nothing happens. You have to affirmatively displace into your awarded category. But if you don't make any decision, that'll become the default, which in some cases, depending on how you got into that category, now gives you a paid move into it. It passes, positive space and highest category is standby. Some other rights that go with that I guess in the past pilots forgo because they forgot to make a decision. Seniority protections for canceled vacancies. So these are some improvements to what happens to a pilot whose vacancy is canceled out from underneath them and a junior pilot has already gone to training and been activated in that vacancy. Now, so first off, if the junior pilot is activated on the same vacancy, that pilot doesn't lose their vacancy. Also, if a junior pilot or any pilot, I'm sorry, has been activated in a subsequent award. And then in the event a pilot's vacancy is canceled, just like the third bullet says there, awards of junior pilots on the same vacancy and all subsequent vacancies must also be canceled. This is solving for the inequity that exists today of a senior pilot who doesn't get scheduled for training for a while for whatever reason. Could be the category they're coming from and is watching other pilots go to training ahead of time, ahead of themselves, and those pilots end up getting activated, and then the vacancy gets canceled. And that's what the today bullet says. Expiration of unfilled vacancies. So unfilled first officer vacancies remain available for new hires for 120 days. Today, that's 90 days. So this gives a little more of a window to continue putting these vacancies into the new hire drop. And then for the narrow body fleets, currently the 737 and the A320, but also for any, as it says there, single aisle non-supersonic aircraft that comes in the future. And that means operated as a single fleet. So the 757 will not qualify because it's operated as a combined fleet with the 767. Those will also remain available for new hires for 120 days. If you remember back, in order to use that, they have to lift the freezes on everybody before they bid, and that's that language that would lock that out. If they didn't lift the freezes, then those vacancies would not be able to be carried on to a new hire drop. All right, so this gets a little more into the inner workings, and this might be where you might have some questions you might have already been thinking about. But it affects various areas of the contract. And here we chose to talk about them together because it makes a little more sense. So today, to bid captain, you need 500 hours in United Aircraft. You need to be off probation, and you need to meet the requirements laid out in FAR 121-436. Tomorrow, assuming this ratifies, any pilot who meets the FAA minimum requirements will be able to bid. So that's the simplification to the bidding process. And then what we're about to talk about is what we've layered on to allow that pilot to ever go to training that doesn't meet our current probationary requirements. So those pilots will be called or treated as accelerated pilots. So that's a new term. And prior to starting training, they'll require 350 hours in type at United. So that gets into, if you're a probationary pilot and you're bidding from the right seat to the left seat, that could apply to you. And if you're a new hire, and I think we talk about it eventually, you'll be trained first in the first officer position of the airplane that you're going to eventually receive a captain bid in. No short cycle, so nothing coming out of training that short cycles your CQ timeline. No probationary review panel. That, as I understand it, is a pretty serious event that probably makes it unlikely you'll get through probation. But that also seems like a good reason to not be trained as a captain early. You must have passed your probationary check ride as an FO, and you must have attended the enhanced captain upgrade training. Once an accelerated pilot begins captain training, probation period ends. Idea there probably seems pretty obvious, but just to say it, we don't want a pilot going through, especially without any choice, a second period of training while they're on probation. They already did it once. So they shouldn't have to go through it again while they're on probation. So that's why we wanted the probation to end at that point. We never want a captain to be a probationary pilot. So that solves that problem as well. And then and this is where some of the extra what we call oversight, gravy, whatever, from a training point of view. One of our worries from working with safety training, the master chair, we had a lot of people involved in looking at this, and the counterparts at the table range from the normal company negotiators all the way up to Kirby, talking about this particular topic. And one of the things that we insisted on is, full protection for these pilots if we're ever going to let them do something like this, as well as some supervision, because hey, one of the problems still at the end of the day, even a pilot that, let's speak hypothetically, maybe comes in with thousands of hours on a 737 or an A320. So we don't really have a question about their technical proficiency necessarily, but they have no idea of what it's like. And we don't mean to be a company pilot. What we mean is to be a United pilot the way that we all envision that to be. And that happens from time on the line, right? When you're on probation. So one of the ways to get there is to make sure you have enough hours on the aircraft at United. That's the 350. And then also, because you're going to go back into training a little earlier than ordinarily you would, the 100 hours of IOE, that's going to be with captains on our United seniority list. And then the additional line check, because everybody gets a 6-month check, so that's not really a new one, but the 18-month check is an additional line check just to make sure that this process is working. We're not so sure that's not a bad idea for all new, relatively junior captains, but that's what we got for these guys. New hire awarded or assigned to captain vacancy. So ADIF 12 talks in some more specific detail about some of the topics I was already kind of touching on before. Initially, they'll be trained as a first officer on that equipment. They'll fly as a first officer in the same base, but we're going to give them some flexibility, some quality of life here even early on that may even make these attractive. We may have new hires saying, yeah, I'll take it, instead of being forced into it in the drop. So they'll be able to change bases via lateral for where they'll fly as first officer. Eventually, they'll need to satisfy the captain bid that they received, but they would also be able to make changes to that based upon their seniority. So they'll be able to participate in base trades and laterals, while they're waiting to go to training, or at any time for the laterals, really.
At their seniority.
At their seniority, right. Prior to captain displacement or vacancy cancellation on the same equipment, that their awards will go first. They're the junior pilots holding it, so they'll go first. New hires and probationary pilots awarded or assigned these will have to have the minimum UPA requirements. And I think this is just a repeat of what we talked about before. They'll have an imputed vacancy effective date established when they reach the UPA hourly minimums to go to training. So in this case, it would be the 350 or 500. And we have a process for that. Do we have a slide that talks about that? So when a new hire receives this in the drop, whether they ask for it or whether they end up having no choice because it's the last one, the company will tell them, we're going to send you to training at 350, or hold on, we're going to send you to training at 500. So they'll know within 7 days of the new hire drop what kind of bid they're getting. And that will determine the imputed effective date for them, and that's when they'll be paid.